The legend of the Obsidian King began with a whisper of ash and ended in a roar of light, but the space between those 2 points was a long, agonizing corridor of shadows. They said King Silas Thorne destroyed everything he touched, a man whose very breath was laced with a primordial rot that had already claimed a dozen innocent souls. On the night the storm broke over the jagged spires of Ironshold Citadel, Elara Vance learned that fate had a cruel sense of irony. It had chosen her to be the next sacrifice on the altar of a cursed bloodline. But what began as a sentence of death would soon become something far more dangerous. A love that could shatter kingdoms, or save them from the brink of oblivion. Dear reader, find a quiet corner. Let the world fall away, for this story begins not in a throne room of gold, but in the shivering shadows of a dying hope. Before we continue, please support us and hit the subscribe button. Your engagement is the fuel that motivates us to write more powerful, heart-wrenching stories. Now let us dive into the depths of the Iron Mountain. The fire had gone out hours ago, leaving the small cottage on the edge of the Frostfell woods in a state of biting, skeletal cold. Elara pressed a damp, frayed cloth to her mother's burning forehead, the fever-hot skin, a stark, terrifying contrast to the icy water that numbed her fingers. In the corner of their tiny, crumbling room, her younger brother Cale huddled beneath a threadbare blanket that offered no real protection. His thin frame was shaking, not from the draft alone, but from a hunger that had lasted so long it had become a permanent part of his identity. It had hollowed out his cheeks and dimmed the light in his eyes until he looked like a ghost haunting his own body. "Shh, Mama," Elara whispered, her voice raspy from sleepless nights and the weight of silent tears she refused to let fall. "You're going to be all right." The lie tasted bitter, like copper and ash, on her tongue. They both knew the truth of their situation. The village healer had come 3 days ago, shaking her head with a grim finality. The herbs needed to break the fever. The rare tinctures that could soothe the lungs cost more coin than Elara's family had seen in a lifetime. The great famine had stripped the land bare, turning fields to dust and hope to dust along with them. The last of their bread was gone, eaten by Kyle days ago in small, desperate bites. The last of their hope was a fading ember in a windstorm. Outside, the wind howled through the cracks in the walls, carrying the bite of the coming winter and the promise of more suffering. The cottage seemed to groan under the weight of the storm gathering in the distance. Thunder rumbled, low and threatening, like the growl of some great prehistoric beast circling closer to its prey. Her mother's hand, fragile and light as bird bones, gripped hers weakly. "Don't," she rasped, each word a visible struggle against the fluid in her lungs. "Don't do anything foolish, my darling Elara. Promise me." Alara's throat tightened, a knot of grief and desperation so thick she could hardly breathe. "Rest, Mama, please, just rest." But what choice did they truly have? What choice did the poor ever have but to barter their souls for one more day of breath? From the corner, Cale's stomach growled audibly, a sound that broke something vital and resilient inside her. He was only 7 years old, and already his eyes held the hollow, haunted look of someone who had learned that hunger was a permanent companion rather than a visitor. "Elara," his small voice was thin. "Will there be bread tomorrow?" She turned to him, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack her face. "Yes, little one. Tomorrow." Another lie, but lies were the only currency she had left to give. The knock came like a thunderclap in the oppressive silence. 3 heavy, rhythmic blows, each one shaking the rotting wood of their door and sending a spike of ice through Elara's veins. She knew that sound. It wasn't a neighbor's gentle tap or the healer's hesitant return. It was authority. It was power. It was fate come calling to collect a debt she hadn't known she owed. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Kyle's eyes went wide with a sudden, sharp fear, and he scrambled closer to their mother's pallet. Even her mother, lost in the fog of fever dreams, seemed to sense the shift in the air, her breathing growing more labored. "Stay with Mama," Elara said softly, pulling the thin blanket higher over her mother's trembling form. Her legs felt unsteady as she crossed the small room, the cold floor biting through her worn slippers. Her hand shook as it reached for the latch, and for just a moment she considered not opening it, considered pretending they were already dead, that they had already succumbed to the cold and the dark. But the knock came again, harder, more insistent, vibrating through the very soles of her feet. She opened the door to the winter night, and something far colder. A man stood there, tall and imposing, dressed in the black and silver livery of the Royal Guard. His face could have been carved from granite, all sharp planes and harder edges, eyes holding no warmth, no mercy, and no recognition of her humanity. Behind him, 2 more guards stood at attention, their hands resting on the hilts of silver swords that caught the moonlight in a way that looked like jagged glass. "Elara Vance." His voice was flat and emotionless, the sound of a man who had delivered death sentences with the same tone he used to order a meal. "By decree of His Majesty, Silas Thorne, King of the Iron Territories, and Lord of the Obsidian Throne, you are summoned to the Citadel." Immediately, the world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. King Silas, the cursed sovereign, the beast who ruled from shadows and silence. Stories whispered in the dark spoke of his isolation and his terrible supernatural hunger. They said every woman he touched died within 3 days, their life force drained by the black magic that ran in his veins like poison. They said he hadn't left his fortress in years, that he had become more shadow than man, more wolf than king. "There must be a mistake," Elara stammered, her voice barely a breath. "I'm no one, a peasant. Why would the king want—" "His Majesty does not explain his summons to the likes of me, and certainly not to you," the guard replied. "You will come now. A carriage waits at the foot of the path." Elara looked back at her family. She understood suddenly and completely what this was. Not a punishment for a crime, but a horrific opportunity. If the king wanted something from her, it meant leverage. It meant her family might survive the week. She knelt by her mother one last time and kissed her brow. "I'll handle it. I'll come back. I promise." As she stepped into the black carriage, she felt the door close with the finality of a tomb being sealed. The interior smelled of old leather and expensive, cold spices. The journey to the Citadel passed in a haze of mounting dread. Through the small barred window, the landscape grew harsher, the trees twisted like clawed hands reaching for a bruised purple sky. And then she saw it. Ironshold. The fortress rose from the jagged mountain like a wound in the earth. It wasn't a palace designed for beauty. It was a monument to power that had forgotten the sun. When the carriage stopped, she was led through massive iron doors that groaned as if in pain. The air grew colder the deeper they went, a supernatural chill that seemed to seep into her very marrow. At the end of a corridor that seemed miles long, 2 doors black as night rose before them. The guards pushed them open without a word. "Enter," one said, his voice echoing. "The king awaits." Elara stepped into the throne room. It was vast, empty and freezing, with pillars of black stone rising like ancient trees. At the far end, on a dais of polished obsidian, sat the king. Silas Thorne was not the misshapen monster she had imagined. He was the memory of a man, a ghost of something once human. He was massive, his shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of a collapsing empire, but he was draped in shadows that seemed to blend with the darkness around him. His face was handsome in the way a jagged mountain or a sharp blade is beautiful, dangerous, cold, and utterly unforgiving. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. They were golden, molten, like fire trapped in amber, and yet they were utterly empty of hope. He watched her approach with the stillness of a predator. "They tell me your family is starving," he said, his voice a low rumble like distant thunder moving over the plains. "Your mother burns with a fever that will take her by dawn. Your brother asks for bread that does not exist." Elara swallowed hard, forcing herself to stand tall despite the trembling in her knees. "Yes, Your Majesty." Silas leaned forward, his face entering a shaft of pale moonlight. "I have a proposition, a transaction. I require an heir. The council demands it to stabilize the borders. My bloodline must continue, and I have run out of time." The words were clinical and brutal. Stripped of any pretense of romance. "One night," he continued. "If you conceive, your family wants for nothing. Land, coin, the finest healers the realm has to offer. If you do not, the bargain is still fulfilled for your willingness. But you must surrender yourself to the darkness of this house." Elara felt the last shards of her girlhood fall away. She saw her mother's pale face and Kale's hollow cheeks in her mind's eye. "I accept," she said, her voice steady and clear. Silas's mask of stone flickered for a heartbeat, showing a flash of something that looked like profound anguish. "You have no idea what you've just agreed to," he whispered. "Tomorrow night, when the moon rises, I will show you exactly what kind of monster your sacrifice has bought." He dismissed her with a wave of a scarred hand. And she was led to a chamber that was like a gilded cage. She was fed and bathed by silent servants who wouldn't meet her eyes, dressed in a silk gown the color of fresh blood. When the sun dipped below the horizon the following night, she was led to his private quarters. The room was lit by dozens of flickering candles, and Silas stood by the window, his back to her. When he turned, his eyes were burning with a hunger that made her skin prickle. "You're afraid," he noted, his voice a low growl. "Yes," she replied. He moved toward her with a predatory grace that suggested he was barely holding back a beast. "Do you know why they call me cursed? My wolf. It is not like others. It devours everything pure it touches." But as he reached out, his fingers trembling, he didn't touch her skin. He stayed his hand an inch from her face, as if afraid the mere proximity would shatter her like glass. "Why me?" she asked, her voice a small flame in the dark. He looked at her with a raw intensity that made her heart skip. "Because when I caught your scent in the village registry, the beast inside me went silent for the first time in a decade." He confessed that his inner wolf recognized something in her, a calm, a celestial resonance he had never known. But the fear remained. He ordered her to leave, unable to bring himself to claim her that night, his conscience warring with the biological imperative of his curse. Elara fled back to her room, but the next day, drawn by a strange, magnetic pull, she found her way to the royal library. It was a cathedral of books, and there she found Silas again. He was unkempt, his hair wild, looking as though he hadn't slept in an eternity. "What are you doing to me?" he snarled as she approached. "Every time you are near, the static in my head stops. The pain ceases." He reached out and, in a moment of weakness, cupped her cheek. For the first time in 30 years, the curse did not strike. There was no screaming, no withering of her flesh. Only warmth. Silas was terrified by the peace she brought him. "I break what I touch," he warned her, his body pressing her against the tall mahogany shelves. "Don't make me believe I could be anything other than a monster, Elara. It is a cruel hope." Days passed in a blur of shared silences and evening readings in the library. Elara would read to him from ancient texts, and the king would listen, his eyes closed, finally finding a semblance of rest. He told her of the origin of the curse, how an ancestor had betrayed a moon priestess, and how the bloodline was condemned to destroy their mates. But the High Council was watching. They saw the king's growing attachment and grew fearful of a peasant girl holding the leash of their wolf king. One morning, the doors to her chamber were kicked open. Guards seized Elara, dragging her to the throne room to face accusations of witchcraft. "You have bewitched the king," the eldest counselor shouted, his voice echoing through the vaulted ceiling. Silas sat on his throne, his face a mask of iron, but his eyes were frantic. To protect her, he tried to deny her. "She is nothing to me," he lied, his voice breaking. "A diversion. A common girl. Remove her from my sight." But when a guard struck her for hesitating, drawing a thin line of blood from her lip, Silas's control snapped. His wolf surged to the surface, and he leveled the room with a roar that shattered the stained glass windows. "Touch her again," he growled, his eyes blazing a terrifying molten amber. "And I will tear this kingdom down stone by stone, until there is nothing left but graves." He stood over her, his breathing heavy, his hands shaking. "I tried to push you away to save you," he whispered to her as the counselors fled. But the ultimate test was yet to come, for the magic of the curse was not so easily thwarted by a king's decree. As Silas held her in the center of the ruined throne room, the air began to shimmer with an ethereal silver light. The windows exploded inward as the moon goddess herself manifested in a pillar of starlight. "Silas Thorne," she spoke, her voice the sound of shifting glaciers. "The curse demands its payment. You have loved, and so the law dictates she must die. Only through her death can your wolf be fed." The goddess raised a hand of blinding light, but Elara stepped forward, shielding Silas with her own body. "Take me instead," she challenged, her voice ringing with a strength she didn't know she possessed. "If my death ends his pain, let me be the sacrifice. But do not call it a curse anymore. Call it a choice." The goddess paused, her celestial eyes seeing the golden light in Elara's own blood. A latent lineage of healers meant to balance the destruction of the Iron Kings. "You are his cure," the goddess revealed, her voice softening. "But the choice must be yours. Love given freely, without the shadow of a bargain, is the only thing that breaks a curse born of arrogance." The light faded, leaving them in the dark. Silas looked at Elara, his eyes full of tears. "I love you more than my crown," he vowed. "And if you'll have a monster, I choose you, Elara. Always." As they kissed, the curse didn't leave quietly. It fought like a cornered animal. Silas's body convulsed as the beast tried to take over one last time. The castle groaned, stones cracking, lightning striking the spires with rhythmic fury. "Don't stop!" Elara cried, her own skin beginning to glow with a silver radiance that pushed back the shadows. She channeled her life force into him, meeting the jagged darkness of the wolf and soothing it, transforming the mark of death into a bond of eternal life. The obsidian throne cracked in two as the power peaked, and then a sudden, profound silence fell over the world. Silas stood, human and whole, his eyes clear and warm for the first time in his life. The curse was broken. The Iron Mountain had finally found its heart. Years later, the Citadel was a place of light and laughter. Elara and Silas ruled together, their bond a legend that gave hope to all the Iron Territories. They had saved each other, proving that even the darkest storms eventually run out of rain if there is someone to hold the umbrella. Thank you for listening to the story of the Obsidian King's silence. If you enjoyed this journey through shadow and light, please subscribe to our channel and like this story. It helps us reach more dreamers like you. Join our community of story seekers today and never miss a chapter of the tales that stay with you long after the moon has set. Your support means the world to us. The transition from a kingdom of fear to one of prosperity was not instantaneous. It required the hard work of a king who had to learn how to lead with a smile instead of a snarl, and a queen who had to learn that her voice was the most powerful weapon in the armory. Silas spent his days walking among the people he had once ignored, his golden eyes no longer terrifying, but a beacon of stability. Kyle grew up in the palace, a boy who never knew hunger again, eventually becoming a knight of the realm who swore to protect the weak. Elara's mother recovered, her fever broken by the royal healers, and the peace of knowing her daughter was safe. But for Elara and Silas, The greatest victory was the quiet moments in the library, where the only thing being devoured was the knowledge within the books they shared. The silence between them was no longer a void, but a bridge. As the years passed, the legend of Elara and Silas became a foundational myth for the Iron Territories. It was a reminder that no one is beyond redemption, and that the most powerful magic in the world doesn't come from ancient gods or celestial curses, but from the simple, terrifying act of opening one's heart to another. The High Council was eventually disbanded, replaced by a parliament of the people, for Silas had realized that a king who rules through love needs no secret cabal to maintain his power. The Ironshold Citadel, once a jagged wound on the mountain, was renamed the Silver Spire, its gates always open to those in need. And every year, on the anniversary of the night the curse broke, the people of the kingdom lit lanterns in their windows, a sea of tiny stars to remind them that the dark only wins if you let the light go out. But what of the moon goddess? Some say she still watches over the Silver Spire, a silver shadow in the corner of the eye on the longest night of the year. She does not come to bring curses anymore, but to witness the legacy of the choice Elara made. For she had learned that mortals, in their brief and flickering lives, possess a courage that even the gods find enviable. The story of the Obsidian King and his queen became a song sung by bards across every continent, a tale of how a peasant girl with a damp cloth and a heart of gold brought a god-touched beast to his knees and taught him how to stand as a man. It was, and remains, the ultimate proof that love is the only thing worth fighting for in this cold, vast universe. In the final years of their reign, Silas and Elara would often sit on the balcony of their private chambers, looking out over the kingdom they had built together. Silas would take Elara's hand, his own hand still large and strong, but now infinitely gentle, and he would remind her of the first time he saw her. "I thought you were a ghost," he would say with a chuckle. "And I thought you were a monster," she would reply, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I suppose we were both wrong." "No," Silas would whisper, kissing her silver hair. "We were just waiting to be found." And in the quiet of the night, as the moon rose full and bright over the Silver Spire, the only sound was the rhythmic breathing of a love that had stood the test of time, fate, and the gods themselves. Thank you once again for staying with us until the very end. Your loyalty as a listener is what makes these stories possible. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. We have so many more worlds to show you. From the depths of the Iron Mountains to the reaches of the stars, our stories are for you. Like, comment, and share this tale with someone who needs to believe in the power of love today. Until next time, may your own story be filled with light, and may you always find the courage to choose your own path. Good night, and may the moon watch over you. The legacy of the Thorne bloodline did not end with Silas, but it changed forever. Their children were born without the curse, but with the wisdom of their parents. They were taught that power is a responsibility, not a right, and that the strongest throne is built on the loyalty of the people, not the fear of the blade. The Iron Territories became a hub of art, science, and trade, a jewel in the crown of the world. And though the years eventually took Silas and Elara, as they take all living things, they went together, hand in hand, into the great beyond, leaving behind a world that was better, brighter, and kinder, because they had dared to love. If you are still here, we want to hear from you. What was your favorite part of Elara and Silas's journey? Do you believe in the power of destiny, or do we create our own fate? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one, and your feedback helps us shape the future of this channel. We are a family of storytellers, and you are an essential part of that family. Stay tuned for our next upload, where we will explore a completely different realm, filled with mystery, magic, and, as always, a romance that transcends the ordinary. Thank you for being part of Moonlit Mate Tales. Your journey with us is just beginning. As the final echoes of this tale fade, remember the lesson of the Silver Spire. No matter how dark the night, the dawn is inevitable for those who have the courage to wait for it. The Obsidian King is silent no more. His story is told in every heartbeat of the kingdom he left behind. And Elara Vance, the girl who wouldn't let the fire go out, lives on in every spark of hope that flickers in the hearts of the desperate. This is the end of their chapter, but the book of life continues. Close your eyes, breathe deep, and let the peace of the moon guide you home. We will see you in the next story. Goodbye for now.